Wow. Folks, welcome back. We got a lot to talk about today. Game 3 of the NBA Finals just went down, and it was one of the best defensive showcases that I've seen in modern NBA. Genuinely, that was really good defensively. I don't want to talk about offensively. There were some duds. Youth really showed. Game 3 was amazing. Back and forth, just back and forth battles the entire time. It was one of those hardwood classics, I'd say. Very chippy, very physical. Everyone pitched in at some point with even like even the players that played terrible. I'll just go ahead and say it. De'Aaron Fox hit the shot that sealed the game, and he played terrible. I mean, he was abysmal. I had a rant ready to go had he not hit that shot, and I'm still really disappointed. But tonight was really special. It was really special because it told San Antonio that they were still in it. You see, the game, the team had to go in there. Their backs were against the wall. They had no pressure on them at all. Well, I take that back. They had all the pressure, but it was so much pressure that it was none. They had no fans to perform for. They had everyone hating against them. And I personally find it easier to shut people up than to deliver when people are counting on you. And I guess the Spurs team that we saw tonight has the same issue because dropping two games at home in one that was a very stupid game that should have been the Spurs win, they both dropped them at home, and now they're coming over to New York, MSG, Madison Square Garden, the most electric arena in history. And as a team full of guys like around the age of 22 with only a 1 year differential over freaking Auburn's average starting lineup age, coming in there that young and being able to dominate the way they did early on and then keep that going, granted following mistakes, but that was due to good defense by the Knicks, but to keep that going and to hold out in game 3, your first game at Madison Square Garden, and take that win, that's impressive. I almost had game 3 as kind of like a guaranteed Knicks shoe-in. Like, if the Knicks are going to get one game, it's going to be game 3 because the Spurs are going to walk into MSG. It's going to be louder than they expected. The lights were going to be brighter. They were going to shut down. That didn't happen tonight, and I'm very glad to say that. Let me run y'all down what happened in my eyes from my point of view, because the first half, this team needed to get a feel for the opponent early on in the series, right? And now they finally showed in the first half they are adjusted to this team. They are adjusted to the Knicks, how they play. They're done with OKC. That celebration's in the past. It is go time. They're down 0-2, and it's wake-up call time. And they answered. The defense, like I said, played phenomenal. Stephon Castle had 18 points in the first half. Actually, no, I think it was first quarter. I want to say it was first quarter because by second quarter, I checked the stats to make sure. I think he had around 22 in the second quarter. And I want to say 18 was the first quarter's end, if not somewhere around there. Phenomenal first quarter, and he just played it out throughout the rest of the game. He was getting hustle plays. He was getting boards. He was getting to the free throw line a bunch, and he just knew what he was doing. He was an anchor on early on, so that way they delivered it whenever they would deliver it at the end to the hands of like Julian Champagnie and De'Aaron Fox and Wembanyama. He was that spark plug early on that kept him in. Him and Devin Vassell both knocked down crucial shots, got to the line when needed, played phenomenal defense, and were hustling the entire time. For such young players, that's very impressive at this level of play. This is the NBA Finals. Freaking sophomore season for Stephon Castle, and Devin Vassell is young himself. For them to go out there and put on this show is impressive. More than impressive. It's phenomenal. And I think if you are Mitch Johnson and the Spurs, you're looking to activate more of that going into the next few games of this series. Your X factor is not in Victor Wembanyama, as we saw in the past 2 games, as we saw now. They have an answer for that. They're not like OKC. Karl Anthony Towns can suppress Victor Wembanyama. He is his hard counter. And they learned to work around that tonight. Victor Wembanyama, speaking of him, he's played more confident in the first half. The defense was lacking, and this was kind of the story for him the whole game. He was playing phenomenal, catching lobs left and right, and he was getting his blocks. But on defense, he was just playing a little bit less tense. He was more lax, as if he was giving himself a breather on the defensive end. And then that led to a lot of weaknesses from the three. Specifically, they allowed a lot of threes from their bench and Josh Hart. Speaking of which, for the Knicks, Josh Hart played phenomenal in the first half. He knocked down 3 3-pointers, 3 for 3 from three, and had 13 points in the first half, which on the scoring sheets, Josh Hart has been very sluggish, but he has been performing well elsewhere. This game, he stepped it up in the box score, and it was phenomenal for the Knicks. I mean, they needed that burst because the defense of the Spurs were closing in on Jalen Brunson so hard. He only had, I think, 5 points in the first quarter and around 11 going into half. So he really was shut down big time by the defense, and so someone else needed to step up. And early on, that was Karl Anthony Towns, that was Josh Hart, but OG Anunoby also had 17 points at the half. The guys were finishing great. The bench was coming alive, specifically Jordan Clarkson, and Jose Alvarado hit an insane shot over Victor Wembanyama early on in the second quarter to establish that momentum. Like, that was when they were starting to cut back the 12-0 lead, and they said, we've got this. Jose Alvarado hit that shot with complete confidence, a 7-footer, 7'4" guy going up to block his shot, one of the shortest guys in the NBA, mind you, steps back, fades away, and says, no, I got this. And he starts a run, and that run would later on lead them to take a 7-point lead at the half. So the bench players really stepped up in the first half. They really played phenomenal. They really had everything right along, and they were backing up the starters that were getting shut down by the phenomenal Spurs defense. I know I keep saying that word a lot, but that's the only thing that's on my mind is phenomenal. This team is phenomenal. However, the main issue with the Knicks was that turnovers are just killing them. Turnovers were the worst of them. They had, I believe, 3 turnovers within the first 5 minutes. There was a 50% chance they would turn it over in that first 8-minute span. There was a 50% chance they were just going to either have the most beautiful play imaginable or straight send that ball into the stands. No block needed. And so the team really wasn't playing well early on, and the turnovers did end up biting them in the butt later on in the night. However, they did patch it up a little bit towards the third quarter. First quarter, they played really bad. Defensively, they weren't there, the Knicks. They were just very lackluster in the first quarter. But the second quarter on, this Knicks team was lethal. This Knicks team shot 14 for 19 in the second quarter. They're at that second quarter score, 42-24 in favor of the Knicks. They came alive that second quarter. And then the Spurs came rolling back in the third and fourth. They threw it away in the third and fourth quarter, but this second quarter really is what kept them in it the entire time, was the Spurs trying to stay alive because of that huge run that the Knicks went on in the second quarter. They were trying to make up for that all game, and they eventually did. But that second quarter run you saw is really promising if you're Mike Brown and the Knicks. So going into the second half, the Spurs really were down 7. They needed a huge run to come in. They needed to establish a lead once again. And boy, did they. Starting off, you had Dylan Harper getting set up a lot more. There were more plays being ran for Dylan Harper because I guess Mitch Johnson and the coaching staff had noticed that the defense was disrespecting Dylan Harper. They were allowing him to have open shots, open lanes in the first half. He was dunking on people left and right, dunked on OG Anunoby at some point. Huge play, by the way. And they really just allowed him to go crazy in that first half, and the Spurs noticed that, so they ran more plays through him. And it took them until midway through the third to finally address it for the Knicks, to be like, hey, this guy is a problem. And surely it got them what they needed. They got back in the lead. They started running more around ball movement heavy. I saw a lot of Greg Popovich's old style of ball from 2000, from the early late 2000s to the early 2010s. I saw a lot of Greg Popovich in how the Spurs played in the third quarter. It was very much so revolving around not making the selfish play. There were many times where people like Wemby would have a wide open 3, but instead they saw Keldon Johnson down in the paint and they said, hey, he's left unattended. This is a higher percentage shot. Sure, it might be worth one more point, but let's make the more selfless play and get it to the guy who's guaranteed a layup. And you saw more of that. You saw, for instance, there was one play that the Spurs had. I remember the ball It was drive and kick out to the corner, and then they just kept going +1, +1, +1. It felt just like watching Tim Duncan, Kawhi Leonard, Manu Ginobili, and Tony Parker in those finals. It felt just like it. Now, they didn't play that the whole game. Obviously, you've got Victor Wembanyama on your team. You're going to want to play a little bit of iso ball. But from what I saw, they had their moments enough to where I'd say it was good. I'd say it was they mixed it up just enough. And with the modern day of the NBA, they really incorporated that ball movement of the previous years. And it's because of Pop's influence. Let's be real. I'm going to go out on a limb and say without Greg Popovich in their ears, they don't get it. They don't get this far. Now, conference finals, maybe I don't think they get past OKC without Greg Popovich in their ears. It just goes to show that man is the greatest coach of all time. Greg Popovich isn't even coaching, and I'm glazing him because of how his team played. That's how good of a man and a coach that Greg Popovich was. Think about that. But moving on from that, more with the Spurs, De'Aaron Fox, oh my goodness. I don't know, whenever I wrote this, he was 2 for 11 from the field and 0 for 5 from 3. That's just unacceptable. And I'm going to look past the fact that you hit the shot to seal the game because the way he played was atrocious. He started out being exactly what he needed to be. That veteran presence, that point guard, that facilitator, get the ball to the wing, maybe the post, we can move around and set people up. But then he tried to be King's De'Aaron Fox. He tried to hit crazy shots. He tried to go in and play hero ball. You're not the lead of this team. No offense, De'Aaron Fox, but Sacramento can take any star, any decently good player, and make them look like a 5-time All-Star. And I'm not discrediting what he did on the Kings, because absolutely what he did while he was there was insane, and that man deserves to have his jersey retired. But the fact is, the small market teams that you used to play for, the Kings, look at Sabonis from his previous teams, from OKC, from Indiana. Now look at him in Sacramento. He's an all-star. He's amazing. He's phenomenal. And it's because Sacramento is garbage. They're great players, but they're not that centerpiece. They're not that star. Fox needs to realize this and take that veteran role back. He needs to play like he did at the beginning of the game. Because ultimately, that's how you're going to win consistently. Let's be real. At the end of the fourth quarter, and I'm going to skip ahead in my notes here. The fourth quarter, they beat the Knicks beat themselves. Both teams retired. They shot terribly. You got lucky you won tonight, if I'm being real. You got lucky because the Knicks got tired. And if you want to win more consistently, then you need to take a step back. Let Vic, let Stephon Castle, let Devin Vassell, let Dylan Harper take the stars, take the starring points. Let your scorers score. You are now a facilitator. You are now what Chris Paul was a few years back. You are now that shoe-in veteran point guard. Act like it. Wemby responded well, moving on. Responded well offensively. He played great offensively in the first half, but he played even better in the second. He was getting where he needed to be. He was playing down low in the paint, controlling the paint. He was getting past these physical defenders, and he was just showing why he's the best. He's getting to the line, and he showed why he should have won MVP in my book this year. However, defensively he was lacking. Toward the end, he gave up a huge layup by Brunson because he played too high up on the screen, and then whenever Brunson came by, he just blew by Wemby, and Wemby didn't drop or he didn't cut off the drive. He just let him go straight by him, and it led to a very, very crucial layup by Jalen Brunson to put the Knicks back neck and neck with the Spurs in the fourth. At the time, I thought that was going to lose them the game. I really did. I said that's enough momentum that New York needs, especially with Jalen Brunson. And Jalen Brunson came to play. Let's get into the Knicks. Because Brunson sat out a lot of the third quarter because he fouled. He picked up his fourth foul and had to sit the bench. They also sat Wemby for the Spurs at the time, so it was really just the role players coming in. The benches were coming out, and they came to play. And both sides played very well. I saw that Jordan Clarkson was life-saving for them. And for the Spurs, Luke Cornett came in, stepped up, and stayed in that paint presence mindset that Wemby had and carried it on while he was on the bench, shutting down Karl Towns many times, shutting down Mitchell Robinson many times, and just overall being a menace on the paint. But I want to go back to Brunson because fourth quarter is when he came alive. He came back, I think, around really early fourth quarter or late third. But the dude just started firing and he couldn't miss. By the end, he finished with 30 points. And there were 2 back-to-back threes he hit late to keep them alive, to keep them within that one possession margin to maybe make a comeback. And when everyone else was tired in the fourth on the Knicks, everyone just gave up. The defense was getting lazy. The offense wasn't moving as much. Brunson was there on that left wing every time. Ball in his hand, playing ISO ball, and putting the team on his back and hitting some insane shots. Just a phenomenal performance in that fourth quarter. Just an amazing performance by him. And Jordan Clarkson, going back to him, is both saving and selling them. Because it was like he'd make a detrimental mistake on the defensive end or make a turnover that was just horrendous. Just absolutely should not have happened. And then he'd go back on the next possession and he'd hit a dagger of a 3 from the corner. Or he'd set up a teammate on the left wing for a dagger 3. Or he'd find Karl Towns in the paint. Or he'd find Mitchell Robinson. Or OG Anunoby would be there on a screen for him to go and drive and make a nice play. Jordan Clarkson was the glue guy tonight. I never thought I'd say that. Because for years, I had believed in Jordan Clarkson. I was like, this man is going to be a really solid point guard. Solid starting point guard caliber. And I was a little wrong about the starter spot. But in the position that he's at, off the bench, he's doing a great job. He's facilitating well. He's doing his role well. He's not overstepping his boundaries. And he's just overall keeping the team in it. He's what you'd call a glue guy. Really well played by Jordan Clarkson tonight, but he did have a lot of mistakes. I think in any other final series against any other team, that might have costed them a lot more than it actually did. But the issue with the Spurs is they're so young that they aren't capitalizing on a lot of mistakes that New York's making. Offensively, I think I'm watching a college game half the time in this series, if I'm being real, because there's so many errors that I'm looking at and I'm like, I've never seen this in an NBA game. I see this in high school. I see this in EYBL, AAU. I see this in college all the time, and it's expected. But to see it on an NBA court, these tiny little mistakes that could be easily fixed by just a lick of game awareness and having like your head in the game and paying attention is just, it's weird. It feels weird. And I can't tell if that's because of how good the defenses are or if the offense is being incompetent. I'm going to give the NBA the benefit of the doubt and say that it is the phenomenal defense of both the Spurs and the Knicks, but it's just been kind of flabbergasting to me. That's just kind of how it's been weird. I don't really know how to explain it. But Josh Hart died. I mean, he really did die in the second half. I don't know what happened. That 13 points in the first half, 3 for 3 from 3, and then he just goes in and dies in the second half. It really bewildered me to see him playing so well and keeping the team on his back in the first half, and then the second half just kind of disappearing. Where'd you go? I don't know, but I hope to see that type of performance again in Game 4. Really good first half for Josh Hart. Just really did die out in the end. And honestly, that wasn't that bad for the Knicks because the story of this game, for both teams, I'd say, was you had a guy that would come in for the first few minutes. For instance, the Spurs. Devin Vassell early on put the team on his back with Stephon Castle. And then towards that midway of the game, it was Julian Champagnie. And toward the end, it was Stephon Castle all the way. And then Wemby, obviously, starring throughout the whole thing. Just like on the Knicks side of things, you had early on, you had Josh Hart coming in. That was being the glue guy. You had Karl Towns. You had OG Anunoby. And then towards the middle of it, you had OG still playing great. You had Jordan Clarkson coming in around the third quarter. And then in the fourth, you had, well, nobody. And that's why they lost. All they had was Brunson throughout the whole game. And whenever they had that second scorer die out in the fourth, well, not much you can really do. They lost this game because they got tired. Fatigue set in. The pressure got on them, and they just gave out. The defense of the Spurs wore them out by the fourth quarter. They came in there, shot 0 for 9 from 3, and could barely get to the free throw line. And say what you want about the officiating being slightly Spurs biased, that doesn't win them this game. It really doesn't. Because there were time and time again where the Knicks got lazy. They're a phenomenal team, and I do think they can easily win this if they make the adjustments needed to go into the fourth and actually win. They need to be able to close out a game. They can't get tired now. It's like Mikal Bridges was saying, despite his terrible performance tonight, you need to play like it's 0-0 when you're up 2-0. And I'd say that they played hard. It's just they ran out of gas. Going into game 4, they need to have more of a sense of urgency. They need to be able to close the games out going forward, because now that the Spurs have settled in, they understand what's going on, and Mitch Johnson has a read on how the Knicks play. I think the Spurs have a legitimate chance at coming back. Down 0-2, odds against them. They don't have home court anymore. I still believe, because if there is a man on this planet that can come back from being down 0-2 after having both home games taken from you, which has never happened in NBA history, mind you, but if there's one person that can make history, it is Victor Wembanyama, and I'm standing by that. So if you're the Knicks, you can't let off the gas. You can't do what you did in the fourth quarter. You cannot collapse. You have to play all 4 quarters out, because that's what the Spurs are doing. This isn't some Philadelphia team. This isn't some Cleveland team. They're not just going to give up. They're not just going to throw in the towel because, oh, we're the 7 seed, or, oh, we have James Harden on our team, so we're going to be lazy. This is the San Antonio Spurs. They're a group of guys that are out to make a name for themselves. They're one of the youngest teams that's ever made it this far, and they've got bloodthirst. They've got energy, and you've got to be able to match it. You've got to use that motivation, because the thing I love about this storyline is that the Knicks are facing a bunch of guys, like I said, that are trying to establish a dynasty based off their new GOAT, the new king in town, Victor Wembanyama, alongside the ragtag team of number 2 and number 4 overall picks, a bunch of young guys itching to make a name for themselves. And on the other end of the arena, you've got a bunch of rejects. You've got Karl Anthony Towns, who was passed on by Minnesota, OG Anunoby, who was moved on from by Toronto. You've got guys like Mikal Bridges, passed up on by Brooklyn and Phoenix. And then you've got Jalen Brunson, the ringleader, passed up on by Dallas. These guys have something to prove, that they're not just something you can trade away and get away with. They want to prove to the league that they are legit and that the Knicks aren't a joke. And they really didn't prove it tonight. I hope they do going forward. I really want to see a good series, and I really want to see both teams play it out till the very end. I don't want to see either team get tired. That's not fun. It's not fun to watch a bunch of guys jack up threes and go 0 for 9 on a quarter. It's not. For the sake of these ratings, they better hope that they're not doing that in the fourth quarter for the rest of the series. But, folks, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I think these Knicks have got to get it together. Phenomenal game defensively from both sides. But the offense needs to clean it up. I'm Luke Dunlap, signing off. Clocking out in the high note. Take care, y'all. Peace.